An orphan said dad to a stranger. What happens next will melt your heart. But before we start, please take a moment to give this video a like, subscribe to Happy World, and hit the bell so you'll never miss these great stories. Life can sometimes be harsh, and the only people who can relate to our suffering and pain are the ones who went through the same thing. This is what happened for a boy who was in a hospital room recovering from a fatal injury. The boy, Sarubi, opened his eyes and looked around, and the first thing he saw was a young doctor standing by his bed. Sarubi looked at the doctor for a while. Then the first thing that came out of his mouth was Dad. That word changed the lives of both Sarubi and the doctor who was tearfully looking at him. Our story started in Ireland, where a baby boy named Brian Siam was born to a wealthy Catholic family that engulfed with all the care and love they could offer. Brian enjoyed a stable and happy childhood full of promises, up until the day his life went upside down. At that time, Ireland was in the middle of a bloody civil war between state forces and armed insurgent groups. The latter were known for using bombs, and unfortunately, they targeted a restaurant at which Brian's parents were dining that night. The news of Brian's parents' death triggered a series of events that altered Brian's happiness into utter misery. The nightmare started when the little boy found himself in the custody of the government as he was placed at a juvenile center, as the quality of life was so poor. The boy had to endure harsh treatment and bad food. As if this wasn't enough, Brian was constantly moved from one center to the other. The little orphan gave in to his fate, trying to make the best out of the dire situation he found himself in. And just as things started to go from bad to worse, a flicker of hope shone in Brian's life, providing the little boy with a way out of his misery. A couple who had also lost their son to a bombing attack came to the juvenile center looking for a boy to adopt in order to honor the memory of their lost son and give love and care to someone who needed them. They moved from center to the other looking for a potential candidate, and when they learned about Brian and how he ended up the orphan, the couple instantly connected with the little fair-haired boy and instantly started adoption procedure. The administrative procedures went fairly quick, and in a short time, Brian found himself enjoying the warmth of a loving family and a place he could call home. The future finally seemed brighter for the little boy as his adoptive parents indulged him with love and care that he missed since his parents passed away. In such nurturing environment, Brian's brilliance shone as he excelled at his studies and showed an unmatched hunger for learning and improving himself. Brian studied hard to fulfill his ultimate dream, and that's being a doctor who would help his society. That was the idea of Brian claiming his place in this world and showing everyone what he was capable of. Upon learning about his goal, the adoptive parents encouraged Brian to realize it and supported the young boy every step of the way. Brian graduated from high school and was admitted into university to study medicine. Yet the young boy was shocked by the reality of the world that didn't fit his vision of medicine as a noble endeavor primarily geared toward helping the other. Brian couldn't stomach the fact that medicine was perceived as means to generate profitability rather than save life without thinking the cost. Brian even got into arguments with his teachers and other academics as he simply refused to alter or give up his principles. Disappointed by what he found out, the young man considered dropping off from medicine faculty altogether. But his parents wisely advised him against that, encouraged him to not give up on his dream, and instead learn the craft to take matters into his own hands and make his own vision of what medicine must be a reality. And so, Brian kept his ideas and ideals to himself, as focused on benefiting from his professor's technical knowledge and experience to be the doctor he always dreamt of being. Years passed by, and our young man graduated as the top of his class after he aced all the theoretical and practical tests, and in recognition to his excellence, Brian was offered a managerial position at a local hospital, despite his young age and recent graduation. The position came with a high salary and several generous perks. Yet the man wasn't a fan of bureaucratic position, where he had to spend his time between meetings and signing documents. Plus, the local health sector was already doing well, and he had nothing to offer to improve things, and so he turned down the offer. Brian sought out an opportunity that would allow him to bring some change to the world and improve other people's lives, and that materialized when he joined the International Red Cross. Brian's parents, who were always supportive of his decisions, this time they didn't approve his decisions, as they thought their son was wasting an opportunity to get a job that would help him secure his future. Things escalated between Brian and his parents as they argued about the matter day after day, yet the young man refused to change his mind and held on to his decision. Eventually, the parents yielded to Brian's choice, as he finally could do what he's always dreamt of, albeit for a very low salary. Yet Brian enjoyed traveling around and helping people of all sorts of life and from all different places. Brian took parts in all the International Red Cross activities, from vaccination campaigns to providing free medical services at deprived rural areas. The young doctor enjoyed every moment he spent volunteering and helping the others, and when an opportunity to do even more came by, he made sure not to miss it. A mission to fight hunger in Africa was announced by the International Red Cross, and Brian didn't think twice, as he immediately volunteered and was accepted as part of the mission. This time around, Brian's relationship with his parents hit an all-time low, as his parents couldn't believe that their son is traveling to another continent thousands of miles away to put himself in danger just to help other people. Despite his mother's tears and his father's heartfelt pleas, Brian packed up and flew to Africa, where he spent 6 years. Years that were the most difficult in his life, as he witnessed the devastating horrors of war and deprivation firsthand. Yet they were also the most fulfilling, as Brian was there realizing his dream on a daily basis by saving lives and helping people who desperately needed him and other volunteers like him. Fully dedicated to his cause, Brian couldn't help it but feeling guilty for all the privileges growing up enjoying, and yet thinking that his life was difficult. What Brian witnessed throughout his mission on the African continent couldn't be depicted by news reports or documentaries. The continent was torn by wars and devastated by corruption and defective government. People there dreamt of peace and some food to relieve their hunger. Brian was on his way back to the camp after a day he spent at a medical center, vaccinating and examining school children. As he passed by a car on the road, he saw a child laying motionless on the back seat and instantly knew that something was wrong with him, and he started shouting to the car driver to stop. Once the driver of the car carrying the kid pulled over, Brian did the same and jumped out of his service car and rushed towards the kid. Upon initial examination, it turned out that the kid was unresponsive, yet he was still breathing. Brian gave him the necessary first aids when he put him in the car and rushed towards the nearest hospital. Brian rushed into the hospital carrying the child between his arms and shouting for urgent medical help, and the kid was immediately admitted into the hospital and examined by the medical team there. The kid spent days in the hospital without waking up, and Brian visited him every single day to check on him. Throughout that time, Brian discovered the story of Sarubi, the kid he rescued. Sarubi was but one of thousands of similar kids abandoned by their mothers, as these women were obliged to make the heartbreaking decision of abandoning some of their kids because they didn't have the means to feed them. So the kids with the least chance of survival were abandoned, and so Sarubi was found unconsciously laying on the side of a desert road. Days passed by and the little kid's condition remained the same, and Brian visited him daily to check on him. And one day, as Brian was standing by Sarubi's bed, the little boy opened his eyes. And as if he was that man who saved his life, the first word that Sarubi said was calling Brian father. Upon hearing that word, Brian burst into tears and took the little boy into his arms, remembering all the hardships he went through and how they were reflected in the horrors Sarubi also lived. On that very day, Brian left the hospital to request the adoption of little Sarubi. Brian's request was initially turned down, as he was a single man and foreigner who was also in a volunteering mission. But Brian was used to not taking no as an answer, and he fought until his adoption request was accepted. And once he got custody of Sarubi, Brian knew that his mission was to give the boy the life he deserved, and so he took Sarubi and flew back to Ireland, where he reconciled with his parents and presented them to their new grandson. Brian's parents were thrilled to have their son back home again, and were even happier with meeting Sarubi, who finally got a family that would take care of him instead of abandoning him in the middle of the desert. Meanwhile, Brian resumed his local volunteering activities, determined as ever to help as many people as he could, all the while making sure that his son, Sarubi, was enjoying a happy and peaceful life. We often focus on human cruelty, but the good that lies inside each of us can change the lives of many people if only we acted based on what hearts tell us. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and tell us what you think about it in the comment section below.